Hi, Jerry. Okay, so we're live on Facebook here with Philippe. Hi, Philippe. Hi, Jerry.
Hi there, Ashley.
How are you?
I'm great.
Good. Welcome.
Hey, Jerry. It's good to, good to meet you.
You too.
So today we've got a little theme here with Philippe. Philippe, would you like to introduce yourself first before we go into the theme?
All right. You can. I mean, if you can introduce me, I'm happy with that. Or I can just.
I can also do a little introduction. So I've personally known Philippe known of Philippe for over 10 years. And I know he's been active in the sacred sexuality and Tantra sphere for much longer than that, actually. And bumped into him last year at the California Tantra Festival. So you were helping organize that, I think, right?
I was helping with the decor pieces.
Right. And you do the Remember project as well, which is, you've got an upcoming training in Costa Rica, right?
Actually, it's in Montreal. So I'm one of the co-facilitators and organizer for the Remember Brotherhood Journey, which is a men's gathering. And it's sort of modeled on ISTA. ISTA stands for International School and Temple Arts. They do a kind of Tantra training. They've been doing this around the world for the last 10 years. And what they do is a 7-day edgy training for men and women and couples, singles and couples. And the idea is to go into an exploration of your own sexuality and sovereignty through shamanic techniques. So that's ISTA. And something that came out of ISTA is the Remember Brotherhood Journey, which is a 5-day long training for men to I think the way we spelled it out is for men to remember what it's like to be a man through their experience of manhood, but also through their ancestors, the ancestors, their parent, their father, their father's father, and father's father's father, and going back in generations, and try to basically come up with their own version of manhood. And so we bring in what we call frames, which are sort of topics of conversation, very similar to what we're going to do today. And we also bring in exercises and rituals that support the man in going deeper in this experience of manhood and their own particular flavor of their experience of being a man. And so that's what we do.
Doing that with Frank, yes?
Yes, with Frank. Yeah, that's right. With Frank, Nimai, and Gilly. And there's 4 of us, which is really a really cool way of sort of sharing power. In ISTA, they do it with 3. There's always at least 1 man, 1 woman. And with Remember, we decided that we wanted that because Frank and Nimai are the inception of Remember, they decided to bring us in sort of as the pillars. And there's something beautiful about sharing power when you know that this brother that is leading totally has, he's totally got the leadership, and all you have to do is just kind of sit back and watch for anything that can go a little bit off and be in support in that way. It's very relaxing. It's a very beautiful act of surrendering power to somebody else, but be ready to take over when it's needed, or share power. Like we switch. Usually there's one person teaching or facilitating, and then there's at least one other person who's sort of the backup or sort of the counterpart. And then the other 2 are just sitting back and allowing things to happen, and also holding space, like men know how to do fairly well. And so yeah, the Brotherhood Journey it's a beautiful way. I mean, it's the way I would put it is the safest I've ever been in a group of men. So my approach to manhood. Yeah, thanks. My approach to manhood tends to be more of gentle masculine, partially because I'm a father, and I've had to sort of I've had my own journey of dating someone who was being abused by her grandfather while we were going out, and that kind of threw me into the waters of, could I do something like that? Could I be that kind of dangerous? And what do I need to become in order to know that even though I have this power to really harm someone, I can use this power for good and have the integrity and the moral framework to actually hold myself as a powerful man in the world that is not harming others, which is, it's not as popular. You know, there's a lot of popular figures, including the main one called Trump, who is expressing that in the other way. And I think there's, because of Me Too, there's been this sort of deeper sense of how men have harmed women. And of course, the opposite is true as well. But the turn to speak of women at that time really highlighted how they've been harmed by men, which doesn't mean all men, and doesn't mean even most men. It just means some men are doing a lot of the damage and creating a sense of fear for women to live in. So how do you be a man in that space without feeling like you might be one of them? And that was my journey, and it was a 30-year journey of realizing that I can be a safe man, but not just being a nice man or a good man, but a man of integrity, and lead the way in that particular way has been a powerful journey of high responsibility.
Wow. 30 years. That's a lot of work.
It's a long journey.
Sure, yeah. You got a lot of good information out of that journey. A lot of teachable wisdom.
Yeah.
And I feel intuitively, like our topics today, dark love, consent, and pushing the edge of yes, like these are the kinds of things that you had to come to terms with on your own, and, you know, within the context of, you know, those men and women around you who are growing as well. And you're in a polyamorous lifestyle as well, correct?
That's right.
So
that's right.
You've got the poly and attachment theory, which is kind of a separate tangent, but all still relevant. Can you tell us what is dark love?
Well, before I tell you what dark love is, I'd have to explain to you what I mean by dark, and on the flip side, what I mean by light, and on the flip side, what I mean by shadows. So if anybody's studied Jung, which I haven't in any deep way, but the concept of shadow came from Jung, and is, in my interpretation of it, is we have a way of interpreting reality, and that way of interpreting reality is based on our morality, it's based on our belief system, and it sort of allows us to perceive reality in a way that makes sense. Like, you look at a table, it's a table, right? You know it's a table. If you look at it through a screen, it's a table, and a picture is the table. There's a sense of what a table is. Now, a table is relatively simple. It's an object where you put things on, and it has a particular use. But when you start looking at things that are a little bit more complex, you need a sense of reality that is a little bit more evolved. Like, even a cat knows what a table is in some ways. They may not call it that way, but they do. But they have a sense that this thing will support them if they jump on it. Now, when we start thinking about things like right and wrong, things get a little bit more wiggly. We don't necessarily know what's right and what's wrong. How do we know? It takes values to do that. But even when we get our values right and we get our life to go well, there's always things that happen outside of that framework of what we believe is real and what we understand as reality, because of our way of understanding it. And everything that's outside of that could be called shadows. It could be called, the things that is so alien that you can't make sense of it, outside of your frame of reference. I mean, there's all kinds of people that believe in energy and magic and things like that. I don't necessarily want to go there. It could be as simple as the way somebody acts. That makes perfect sense for them, but for you, it makes no sense whatsoever. And to a degree that it might be harmful to try to understand them or to be around them, because the way they act towards you could be not just physically harmful, but psychologically or emotionally. So shadows, your shadows, is what's outside of your frame of reference, to a degree that it could make you mad if you dive so deep enough into it. And anybody who's done LSD in their life knows some version of that, because they've probably touched on the frailty of reality. All right, so that's shadows. Shadows is outside of you could also say that shadows is what's at the edges of it, is what's insecure, immature, and unaware. what you're unaware of, what the things that are not on the table, not the same table, but just on the table of your consciousness, everything that's outside of that, because of your lack of maturity, awareness, or security, it could be said that that's right at the edge of the shadows. And as you grow, these things kind of come into view, and you start to understand them, and you start to, your sense of the world starts to grow. And as your sense of the world starts to grow, these things that are aware in the shadows about yourself and maybe about others starts to become more clear. You start to gain discernment about it. So it goes from the shadows into, some people would call it light, but I'll just call it visible, your visible frame of reference. Okay, now that we've got that, the two sides of the visible frame of reference is either dark or light. And the way I refer to those is, dark is everything that's messy, fucked up, paradoxical, that makes a little sense, but it's still a part of you. It's your messy stuff. It's chaos. It's sort of like the way chaos is expressed through you. And so we all have experiences in our life that we just had to deal with it, and it was messy, and it wasn't as perfect as you could possibly make it. It has no structure. Maybe you were a child and your parent just freaked out or abused you, or experiences that were difficult for you that you just managed your way through it, which is why you're still here. But it eroded you a little bit because of the chaos that you had to go through. That would be dark. Dark is chaos. And then light, you could see light as structure. It's like making sense is that things that allow you to hold yourself, to hold the chaos that happens. So whether it's beliefs or understanding or routine or intelligence, is very much about making sense of the chaos. And in that sense, if you have good intelligence, you can roll with reality, because like, oh, this makes sense, this makes sense, this makes sense. And you have a belief system and a moral framework that will allow you to engage with the randomness of reality in a way that doesn't make you crazy. So back to what's inside of your frame of reference. So it could be said that inside of that frame of reference, there's all the things that happen to you that you've processed and made sense of and integrated. And that's all the chaos in the darkness. And you've developed a framework that keeps you sane around it. And so that would be the light. Okay, so what is dark love? Dark love could be said as taking whatever is chaotic and however you've integrated thing as perfectly par for the course. In a way, it could be seen as trusting that whatever chaos happened in your life and however you engaged with it as a perfect unfolding of sorts. And you could even take it to the next level, which is to say, to experience dark love is to experience loving the trajectory that you are as a human being, which includes the darkness and the light as an unfolding, as the two of them together kind of mixing to create who you are. That's a very spiritual way of looking at it. And you could even take one step further and say that dark love, like a higher level of dark love, if there's such a thing, is to even trust the darkness. Trust the shadows. Trust that whatever is beyond the edge of your understanding that you're growing into slowly, that's also going to unfold just right in some way, shape, or form that will be just right or par for the course. Even if you don't know what it is, and even if you don't know if it's going to be harmful or beneficial, like, you know that it's going to happen, it's going to unfold, and you can trust in that. Some people could call that believing in God or loving God. Some people could have a more Buddhist approach around equanimity, or and I'm not a Buddhist, so I'm sure I'm going to botch this up completely. But there's a sense that it's not about God, it's just about how you relate to reality and you dance with it.
It sounds very Taoist to me.
Perfect.
It sounds very Taoist to me, where you fully embrace the unknown, and that's, for me, in my personal spiritual practice, that's essential. Mm-hmm. Without that, I wouldn't be able to explore the edge. I wouldn't be able to embrace my crazy.
Yep.
I wouldn't be able to be a balanced human being, someone who is both fully grounded and rooted in the earth and also working on my ascension. which is what we do in Tantra, right? Which is it's another way of translating the work that we do with the chakras. You have the root chakra, you have the crown chakra. There is no mud, no lotus. This is one of my favorite quotes ever. So for me, it's all like and it's the middle path, which is perfect. And that's what I hear you saying, essentially, is that embracing all of it and standing in the middle, trusting that is the source of actual creation. I think in Christianity or maybe in science, like scientific terms, you have like symbiosis, or you have like the sacred and the profane, right? And sacred and profane are more so judgments, because under a Taoist perspective, everything is sacred, right?
That's right.
So, and that kind of, that sacred and profane delineation almost causes a dissociation, or that the judgment complex that so many modern humans have adopted, right? Which is driving them crazy and creating separation. But yeah, like I love this. I love that now I know what dark love is, and it makes complete sense to me as well. So
yeah, I mean, like reality is messy, and you can just trust that you'll over time learn to engage with it better. And I think that's a sign of maturity, awareness, and security. So that's the shadow work, right? Why do shadow work? Why does it matter, right? Why is it beneficial? Well, that's because over time you get better at engaging. You essentially get better at loving reality moment to moment to moment. Regardless of how messy it is, regardless of how fucked up it is, regardless of the fact that people harm you. And it's not a bypass. When it's not a bypass, obviously you need a sort of the intelligence and the spiritual fortitude to actually roll with reality when it comes your way. You can't just, otherwise it becomes avoidance or bypass. And this looks specifically like this. You're with somebody you love and they love you, and you forget that at some point they will hurt you. And because you forget that, when it happens, you're like, what the fuck? Instead of saying, of course, that's totally
instead
normal.
of taking responsibility for it and recognizing what within you feels hurt, and how you can, from a mature standpoint, manage that, and also maybe refine your relationship or repair. Or
well, for me, the challenge is, if I can't roll with reality, then what's missing inside of me that I can't do that? What resources are missing? Is it a missing understanding? Is it a missing of compassion? That's the responsibility. It's not like I'm just going to take responsibility. It's like, can I identify what is missing in my awareness or my abilities to actually fully engage with this? And if I can't roll with it, then I'm able to engage with what's missing instead of shame or wrong, or some sense of shame or wrong, then it's one step ahead of just the shame or wrong. And unfortunately, moral frameworks that are actually really complex, even Christianity is a very complex moral framework. It's not as simple as most people make it to be or believe it to be. And partially because the reason for that is because not everybody has the level of intelligence to engage with it with intelligence, with a high degree of nuance. So good moral frameworks it'll be possible to engage with it by a variety of people with a variety of intelligences. But for some people, to say everything happens for a reason could absolutely a bypass. And for some other people who really do have strong faith, will say everything happens for a reason with a sense of love in their heart. And that's how you know if you're bypassing or not. Yeah,
I feel
that's
like
how
the
you know if it's
people
shadows or not.
I feel like the people who have this real strong sense of faith don't actually say that often. It's almost like a quiet, for me, when I am in that state and I'm like, everything happens for a reason, what can I learn from this? It's all about self-mastery. I'm not walking around telling people that, because for the most part, people don't want to hear that. It seems
and it's a personal choice.
Yeah, I mean, it is, you're right. And I think I was flipping through Facebook stories earlier today, just seeing what my friends and network are up to. And someone had this woman that I know who has been practicing and tantra for a while, and in a spiritual, she was an inspiration to me in the San Francisco community when she was living there. Her name is Elizabeth Bass. You might know her.
Oh yeah, I love Elizabeth. Yeah. She's doing a book writing kind of immersive thing. Maybe I don't have all the details. I was literally just clicking through. But she said something that really struck me, and it was like, she was talking about the intuitive flow and how your ability to speak beyond the intellect is another set of intelligence, where you almost channel it through. And when you talk about personal choice, it's a personal choice to cultivate this ability through meditation, through this spirit, through this work that we facilitate, right, at tantra festivals and one-on-ones and coaching practices and all of this stuff, like you've been doing for 20 years. And I'm at the point now where I'm like, okay, so yeah, everything happens for a reason. I want to go deeper into the dark side of things. And I think why I picked these 3 topics is because they deal with a lot of the mess, especially from the feminine, right? Like consent. You were talking about the Me Too movement, like, and maybe I shouldn't say the feminine. Me Too, like, sexual abuse can happen across genders, regardless of your gender. Right? That just happens to be that cisgendered, female-bodied people kind of rose up with their voice in that movement, predominantly speaking. And you mentioned it. But yeah, pushing the edge of yes, like pushing boundaries and finding consent from a place beyond the norm, right? From not from fear, not with extreme trepidation because you're worried, but from a knowing, and from the ability to like intuit, right? That's, for me, that's what I get from it. Tell me more. I can't say more. So one thing I want to say quickly is what you named is sort of like acting from flow, from the, I can't remember the words you used. The example you gave from Elizabeth, that's what I call spiritual intelligence, which is your relationship to the mystery, to the void, to the unknown, to the not knowing, to things that are untouchable, unknowable. And it is what I call spiritual intelligence that allows you to engage with that by saying everything happens for a reason. I don't know the reason. I may never know.
Yeah.
But there's a reason. And the reason can be so complex that I can't even fathom it. I mean, obviously, everybody's moving on their own trajectory, and these trajectories kind of intersect. And there's different ways to look at that to understand why. But I think mostly the biggest thing that we're good as human, one of the biggest things we're good at as human beings, who have evolved the ability to believe. And it is that we believe that what we did happened for a reason. We believe we actually are very good at justifying our own actions or the things that happen to us. That allows us to actually roll with a reality that we can't know, but we can still imagine. Animals don't do that. Animals just go, whoa, that hurt. I'm going to stay away from that. And then maybe over time they kind of come back to it because they're curious. But
they also forget, right? Animals have much shorter memory. Memory.
And they don't have the capacity for abstraction, so they can't imagine things that don't exist already. We have the ability to do that, which allows me to know what's on the other side of this wall, even though I'm not looking at it right now. And a cat will never think about it. They'll go in the places that they always go, and they'll see the things they always see, and it'll be like very, very natural grooves in their brain. But for us, we can actually say, oh, I want to build a deck on my back porch and start thinking about that. Now, this capacity to imagine things that don't exist also gives us the capacity to go beyond our senses, and also gives us the capacity to go beyond our ability to understand, including our ability to justify our actions. And so that's all spiritual intelligence in my book. Yes.
Can I say something here?
Yes, please.
speaking of this dark love, you know, my whole life I've identified as heterosexual, and that's kind of my jam. And I've had some experiences, and as I get older, some other experiences, and as I get older, I just find that you know, people say, what do I know? Well, that's kind of more where I'm living at with now, is what the fuck do I know? And I don't want to limit myself to experiences the rest of my life that I may potentially miss out on or have growth from if I'm not open to them. And so I'm kind of like looking at this gender fluidity thing now. Not that I'm looking to rush out and suck a dick, you know what I'm saying? But you know, I want to be open to what is. And so can you speak into that a little bit? Is that kind of like broaching the dark love sort of model?
Yeah, I mean, it's, if you look at it as you start to explore. I think dark love or shadow, or which is similar to shadow work. It's just a different way of calling it, at least in my book. To be in a place of dark love is to explore things that can be messy, right? That you don't have fully understood, which is shadow work. So I just want to say also that like deep shadow work is basically beyond you know, it'll flatten you if you don't know how to go about it. So it's not you can't just say that doing things that are uncomfortable is necessarily shadow work, but you're definitely on the edge of it, because what you're exploring is the edge of what's your sense of the known. And to say things like, what do I know? And I want to be open to exploring things that I don't know, is essentially being open to exploring those edges and growing them, and growing yourself past those edges, and growing those edges beyond who you are right now, and growing that bubble bigger and bigger and bigger. So in the context of gender fluidity or sexual attraction, absolutely, there's a framework of what you're attracted to, or what you've been attracted to, and then you want to explore beyond that. And so I think that's perfect. I think that's a great practice of developing spiritual intelligence for the purpose of growing yourself as a person. And you don't know where you're going to find edges that don't move, or you're going to find somebody else who will go on a trajectory with you to explore these things. So whether it looks like a dick, or whether it looks like a woman who's like, I want to explore what it's like, I want to bring my inner man more out. And you're like, wow, I feel like I can bring my inner woman out. I feel like she's really young and kind of or immature or unaware, and she feels safe enough to come out. And so to find a people that you can have these sort of what I would call transpersonal trajectories, transpersonal engagements, which is sort of like there's a way that one of your archetypes pops up and one of their archetypes pops up, and they go on, they either have an epic battle, which could be a massive conflict. And whenever you have a conflict, you could look at it that way. What are the archetypes coming in battle right now? Or it could be, wow, this is actually the kind of archetype that's showing up in front of me, that this archetype is rising up to meet them, which is also part of why polyamory is so great. And I can get to that in a second. All of this, yeah, go ahead. Oh,
sorry. We've got Leanne who also wants to ask a question. Whenever the right time is.
Great. It's so easy for me to jump from dot to dot. So is this helpful for you, Jerry?
Oh, there's Jerry. He muted himself.
Thank you.
Jerry's good? Okay, good.
Yeah, so good job and right track. That's what I have to say. Awesome. Leanne, so sorry to make you wait.
No. It's totally fine and perfect. And Ashley, I appreciate this. It's like divine everything, because this is crazy ass shit that I'm going through. So hopefully I can say this quickly and summarized it. But I essentially, I've been taking classes and ascending and doing lots of things, lots of crises for a good year now. lots of things happening. But I basically just was in this class that started maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago. And it's an ascension manifestation kind of embodiment class that what I saw was like, I reached out to the instructor and I said, do you realize you're teaching people how to do sex magic? And he just kind of laughed at me and said, oh, no. I didn't know that, and I'm not doing that. And I have, though, in like past lives, and I used to do Tantra, but I stopped teaching it like 10 years ago, and I'm not doing that. I'm at like the level above, so you don't have to use genitals in this, but and then he left it at that. And I had a hard problem, like a difficult problem with that, because he told everybody to, when I first joined the group, there were like 30 people in it. I got kicked out of the group, so it's a nice fun story. But there were like over 100 people in it. Yeah, there were over 100 people in it when I, the last I knew. Now, there was like a certain amount of people that were like the major players, and it was online, and we're like interacting and whatever, posting what our sessions were and whatever. But what I saw was that it was very unstructured. It was chaotic. Nobody knew when there was supposed to be a class. Nobody knew when they were supposed to be alive. Nobody knew what was happening when the sessions were trainings. Like it was kind of mayhem. But I reached out to him because I'm very intuitive, and I have visions all the time. And I said, okay, so what I see is that you're having people partner up with people that aren't their partners, even when their partners are in the class with them. And they're doing this intense, deep work that involves the Kundalini rising and these motions and intense energies and divulging and, accessing your demons to be able to expel them, right? These people are going to end up falling in love with each other, not knowing what the fuck is going on. And they're going to end up having all these healing crises. And like, I can see that this is going to happen. And he ignored me. He laughed at me, and he told me essentially that I didn't know what I was talking about. And also just to trust the process, because great things can happen. And I ended up being somebody that found somebody that was also willing and open to be with the process, and then realized, hey, we've had past lives together. And it turned into this whole big, huge thing where the guy was very upset because he was scared, because he didn't know what was going on, because all these deep, intense emotions started coming out. We made love energetically, you know what I mean? Like all these different things, extremely intense connection. And then, the instructor basically ended up, like, the guy was married. His wife freaked out about stuff. The guy even said, like, I would contact the instructor and I would be like, this is what's going on. And he would say, no, it's not. I know. Thank you for holding space for me. I would say, this is what's going on. And he would say that it wasn't. And then the next training session he did, he would teach what I told him was happening. And then, never acknowledged anything on my end. But then almost done. My story's almost done. And so all this stuff is happening, and all these people are, it's like a poly thing. So everybody's meeting with like different people and having their own, growth and, expansion, whatever. But then, the teacher ended up, because the man that I was working with, his wife freaked out about it. He ended up telling he kicked me out of the class, told everybody in the class that I was a demon and that I was sexually violating people because on like towards the beginning of the class, because I'm very like super conscious. So at the very beginning of the class, and I use plant medicine. So this one day I was really stressed out. I needed to go to sleep. So I used some cannabis and I went to go to bed. And this partner had come to me to tell me like, hey, look, I can help you connect with your partner that you're, wanting to reconnect with. So we started having sex, and then all these different people from the class came in. And while it was happening, I actually took my phone and was messaging him. So that way it was like, merging both worlds together. But then these other people came in. So I told the instructor, like, no, people are coming to me to like help heal them. And like, they don't even know that they're doing it. Like, can I please support you in this class? Because there's all kinds of shit happening here that is going to fuck stuff up. And he just wrote me off. And then, the class happens. And I ended up getting kicked out, got all my money back, but was told that I was sexually violating people. And this guy is like so messed up. He doesn't even know what to do. And everybody's telling him I'm evil but I'm the only one that understands him. So he keeps reaching out to me because he knows I'm the only one that can help him. And the instructor is literally scared of me. And it's like, oh my gosh, like people.
It's very,
Like,
it's very dangerous. What he's doing is very dangerous and irresponsible.
It's so messed up.
Yeah, let's let Philippe just talk for a moment.
Yeah, if you could please.
That was a lot of information. Philippe, if you have anything to break, if you can break something down for us.
Well, first of all, thanks for the story. Thanks for sharing. You know, clearly it was difficult for you, and you had experience. You know, the experience that with the instructor was very difficult in the ways that he was perceiving you or misperceiving you, I would say, compared to the way you understand yourself to be, and you know, one of the sayings that I have is first of all, you can't learn without making some mistakes. That's clear to me. That's unless you have a teacher that can prevent you from making mistakes, but then you're not really learning. So that's the first part. That doesn't mean at an effectiveness level that just happens. At a moral level, when you're teaching, you have the at least a lot of moral frameworks will say, do your best not to harm people or to cause a situation that will harm people.
Yes.
Teachers or facilitators will range from everything happens, you know, the sort of like trust the shadows, and like I said before, trust the shadows and eventually this will work out, to teachers who want to make it as safe as possible. Most teachers are somewhere in the middle where they're like, okay, I'm going to bring everything I got to the table to actually support people in having an experience that can be difficult and painful, but not as much as possible, not create suffering or not create an experience that will require healing, which you can never completely prevent. And so you can do your utmost, and a high degree of mastery means that you can do things that at least on the outside look really scary and really dangerous, but you can do them well and the chance of being hurt is low. Rock climbing is a perfect example. They've evolved how to do it in a way that you can still hurt yourself, but chances are you're not going to kill yourself. Like it's a tiny chance, and people do kill themselves in the process, but it's highly unlikely that you will hurt yourself in any permanent way. Same for driving, right? So it takes a very good teacher to do this, especially if the teacher is engaging with deep primal energies, and like it's trying to teach that, and the people that come to the class don't have the wherewithal. They don't have the ability to engage with that energy in a way that's safe, and the teacher is not able to create a class that will sort of where people self-select out or have an application process. It'll prevent people from showing up unless they've reached a certain level of ability in that particular realm. And so, yeah, what I'm hearing is that he was teaching things that were dangerous. The people came in not understanding what they were dabbling with, and it sounds like he wasn't even clear about what he was dabbling with and having people dabble with, and the potential and the risk for harm. And it kind of reminds me of you know, all my years at festival and people doing recreational drugs, and I'm like, okay, this is great, everybody's having a good time, but it just takes enough people killing themselves or harming themselves before people wake up that this is still dangerous. It's not just fun game. You call it recreational, but it's like recreational driving. At some point somebody's going to crash, and so to understand that takes practice and experience, and ultimately wisdom. It takes time to understand where the risks are and how likely they're to be, and how do you engage people in a growth process that's powerful and not safe, but safer. And so there's steps that can be taken in order to support people and to be their most sovereign self by recognizing the risk, even if they haven't done something already. And that's as much as I can say based on your story.
Yeah. I mean, so what it sounds, and quite honestly, I appreciate that, because that's exactly what I believed at the beginning. I told him all this stuff was going to happen. He's never done it in a format like this. He's only done it as like a week-long thing. And this has been like 2 months. So and his team told him not to do it, but he wanted to do it anyways because of all of the landlocked stuff. You can't fly, and, you know, is interfering with his money making. And so all of these things going on, but yeah, I appreciate that, because everything that you said is exactly what I told him. And he just didn't want to hear what I had to say. And multiple people that have been working with him told me I was his teacher, and he just doesn't want to hear anything. And it's like, I'm not being arrogant. Like, I'm here because I'm concerned about people. The thing is, though, is that instead of him being willing to surrender and recognize that what I was saying was happening, he essentially kicked me out and told everybody I was a demon that was sexually violating everybody. So all of the work that I did with them, like all the different people that I worked with to help release their shit, now there's like an impingement on their healing, because they're concerned about, because of all of his traumas are being released across the group. And I think the group is like ending in a week, but like such an impingement on people, and like how much trauma did that create?
I think just in the interest of time,
I'm done. Thank you so much.
But if you want to talk more about facilitation and stuff with Philippe, you know, outside of this, I would encourage that connection, because he's got so much experience and I've seen him in action. And I mean, he'd be a good consult at the very least. So
I mean, anywhere to like heal and to go somewhere more with this. But thank you so much for the time.
If I could just add to that really quick. You were great in trusting your instincts from the beginning, and it went all the way through. And especially when a teacher like that, when you mention something that you're concerned about and he laughs at you, I mean, these are clear red flags of somebody that is dabbling where they shouldn't. And everybody there makes their own decisions, but huge responsibilities. I learned that early on with astral sex, that there's a huge responsibility in these things. And
and I mean, I didn't know what was. I didn't even understand it. So
nothing to play with. It's nothing to play with.
I'd like to add something really quick around this. Is just to go back to, how do you make an experience safer for people, right? Usually the reason you want to make an experience safer is because people go into their chaos, and there isn't enough structure to hold their chaos from going all over the place, which is often what happens when we get harmed. We lose presence, or presence is pushed out of us because of the intensity of the experience. And that is actually, so I want to segue that into this concept that I call pushing the edge of yes. And so when you take people into a class that will engage them with their chaos, or will engage them with primal energy like Kundalini, that's chaotic power, and that power needs to be harnessed. And sometimes people have Kundalini awakenings that leave them flattened for months, and sometimes they come out of it, sometimes it stays with them. So to create enough safety so that risky or potentially harmful things can happen, you have to have enough structure. And this, we'll go back to the rock climbing example, or back to driving in the what do you call that? All the rules of driving, right? There's a reason why we have that, is so that there isn't an overwhelming amount of harm that happens. So I want to segue that into pushing the edge of yes. When I started doing classes on consent, the word on the street was only if it's a yes. And then of course I'm talking to my lovers who are like, please ravish me. And I'm like, how is that possible? How can I ravish you in a way that you look like you're scared and you look like you're freaking out, but it's good? and so we started talking about that, and she was like, yeah, there seems to be a contradiction here. And so what I came to realize is that, much like it is for sensation play, where you create sensation in somebody's body, the amount of pleasure goes up until the point, up until the edge, and then if you cross that edge, then harm can happen. Then it's pain and potential harm. So the pleasure in the experience is to approach that edge of chaos. The chaos goes up. You don't know what's going to happen. Maybe at a primal level, or you start to have a fight, flight, freeze response. But it's not too much that you fall into it, and such that it creates a harmful experience. It creates an exciting experience, and that's why it's important to look at it, because that's where a lot of the pleasure and the experience, because often pleasure and pain are really, really right next to each other. And so in sexual play, you can't not look at it. You just have to be sure to develop yourself as a lover to calibrate your partner so you don't go over. If you stay on the right side of the edge, then it can be the most amazing thing. Whether it's ravishing or whether it's spanking or whether it's scratching, whether it's biting, whether it's hard sex, or even soft sex. There could be an edge I can barely feel it, but past that, but just a little bit more as I feel it just enough that I can relax into it. Most of the time we speak of the edge of too much. And at the edge of too much, the nervous system starts to wig out. And it starts to wig out because it's going into a fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And so part of the fun of engaging as primal mammal human beings is to be able to approach these edges. And so initially I was like, well, why don't we have classes on consent that is not just hell yes? Because hell yes, for a lot of people, it means the safest possible. But approaching the edge of too much for the nervous system, that's not safe. It's not safe at all. It's actually super risky. And that's why the BDSM community has this process with the safe word and the aftercare and the either the safe word or green, yellow, red, so that we know when we're approaching that edge, and so that as much as the sub can manage it, the sub can say red and everything stops. Right? We need this kind of structure in order to create an experience that is less likely to be harmful. But it's important to explore it. So the whole conversation around consent often is, it's not necessarily that one person wants something the other person doesn't want. It's two people are engaging, and at some point one person barges over this other person's edges and freaks them out.
Now, can I say something really quickly, Philippe? We're
Sure.
getting into BDSM, which is actually something that I personally don't explore very much at all. I haven't. Yeah. I'm not a yay or a nay to it. It just hasn't been, it hasn't been a major theme in my sex life. But pushing boundaries and exploring the edges definitely has, from a tantric standpoint. And if we're talking about tantra and energy, for instance, and your receptive and assertive qualities, what I find happens if a partner is pushing me to a certain edge, so to speak, or taking me someplace, and I'm like, whoa, this is really intense. My assertive comes out, right? I'm like, I fire back. And I think that's fun, that brings out, if you want to talk about primal energy and talking about the assertive qualities within the feminine. I'm very receptive. I love to surrender, and part of that is coming right back, rebounding, like just jumping back in it and being like, and there's a surprise or a shock factor. And I don't know, it keeps things interesting and playful, it's
Well, to me, that what you just explained, and the kind of the developing the ability to approach the edge safely with enough structure that it's safer, allows us to actually do a form of shadow work. The shadow work of, here's the edge of what my body can take. Here's the edge of what my nervous system can take. Like, imagine that's a bubble, and we're gonna push on that bubble, and let's see what happens, right? And if you do it well, then nobody gets harmed. Maybe maybe there's a few bruises here and there. But the point being is that by being okay with approaching the edge, which often you can feel because you can start, it gets kind of squishy. I call that a soft boundary. You start to push. It's like if you hold your finger, right, there's a point where it stops, but then you can kind of push a little bit longer, a little bit further, and at some point you would break it, right, past a certain point. So the squishy part is the soft boundary, and the hard part is the hard boundary. If you push past the hard part, you break your finger. If you push against the squishy, that can actually be great. Yoga people do it all the time. Right? So you get into that squishy zone and you push it, and it supports you in growing. And that's the sort of the very super light version of the shadow work that I was talking about. We're getting to those edges and we're just pushing a little bit. Working out is the same thing. Rock climbing is the same thing.
I like that, the squishy zone.
The squishy zone.
I like the squishy zone. I think Tim has a quick, I don't know how quick of a question, but he has a question. I shouldn't say quick.
Yeah, go for it.
So thank you very much for all the information. It's very, very informative. And I actually haven't really heard many people talk about, you know, sort of like the dark edges and this sorts of things. So it's very refreshing to for you to talk about that. And I guess more of my question, I mean, we kind of like explored this topic pretty well, but as far as I'm actually going to be getting into working with men. And so I'm just kind of curious, I mean, you know, if you did address this already and I missed it, you know, hopefully not, but as far as like what issues you see arising with men related to this, as far as, I mean, is there like some sort of a little bit of a hesitancy with like the whole Me Too movement of like kind of like being too aggressive, or kind of like, you know, how does this really, have you seen it affect men, and what are some like tools or techniques you've used to kind of help men in this area?
Okay, well, that's a great question, fantastic question. I have some thoughts and some answers, and by no means does it mean that it's all the answers. So I'm gonna give you my thoughts, and you know, maybe that's gonna be useful to you. If it is, great. If it's not, throw it out the window. I'm not attached. My perception is that men are typically raised to be more, to engage more with their body, which somewhat makes them more somatically intelligent. They're encouraged to use their body a lot, and to some degree, it makes them also a little bit more primally intelligent, so more in touch with their inner animal. Not necessarily, but you know, moving more with the body. And also apparently boys are more likely to engage with their bodies rather than their speech patterns, their speech centers. And that's just boys and girls. You know, the girls actually grow up around speech much faster than boys, and boys grow up faster in the other way. And I'm sure there's gender, biological sex-based reasons for that I'm not fully aware, but I know they exist. So I think boys are more socialized to use their body and also to engage their animal. But sometimes they're not engaged to engage with their animal. They're socialized to do things that look like primal. It just looks like it because, you know, there's movies, there's shows, there's TV, there's other men, and they do things, and men, you know, a lot of what men do is sort of gauging each other and figuring out like who's the boss, and there's this sort of who's the most disagreeable in the room, and at a primal level, there's sort of a pecking order that is kind of set up, and that's also perfectly primally normal. But having said that, there isn't as much say roughhousing that happens when boys grow up. I think the feminist movement has had fantastic created fantastic opportunities for women, but it's also demonized just sort of the primal and the physical aspects of manhood. And
it has emasculated men in a lot of ways, right? That's a term that's being used. But I actually personally really appreciate that. As a mainly heterosexual cisgendered woman, I really appreciate those things. So just putting that out there for you men.
So
it's still appreciated.
All of this to say is that the boys don't get as much practice as they used to. Also, families are smaller. Kids are staying inside. Well, right now they are, but even then, you know, they could be in a school that's further away. There's no encouragement for boys to actually be physical with each other, and in a big way, roughhousing is looked down upon. So all of this results in boys and girls being less somatically intelligent, which means they don't know how to engage with their body well enough to calibrate and to actually to a great degree learn compassion from how you can hurt somebody, and you have to sit with the other person as they're hurt until they're ready to play again. And if you sit well with them, then you not only learn to be with them in their pain, but to actually apologize and to say and you learn to calibrate in that process. So if that never happens, then you lose the ability to learn to calibrate. And so men will do things that are aggressive because that's what men are told to do or taught, socialized to do, without really knowing the powers that they have inside their body. And the result is that they harm others instead of being like, oh, I get it. And then women on the flip side are because they also haven't been roughhousing nearly as much, and they haven't grown up with 5 brothers and sisters, and they haven't grown up with other kids and having to kind of fend their way because society has said, hey, let's give you a chance. Then the badass women that can say, fuck no, you're not going to touch me that way because I don't like it, they're less likely to do that.
Mhm.
They're more likely to expect the men to do the right job or to do the better job or to be the nice guy or the good guy, which turns out to be actually less safe than a man who knows their body, knows how dangerous they can be, and can reel it in to just the right amount.
Mhm. Makes sense. Okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's, oh, I just want to add a quick thing to that. So in that context, it's my firm belief, and that's what I teach, is that women, and there's another piece that I mentioned right now that in a second, is that women could use to become more primally intelligent, to get in touch with that rage inside. That I know this woman, she's like 5'1", and she has enough primal rage that she could make guys kind of retreat just by looking at them, right? She's got that, and you can tell by just looking at a picture of her, you know that she's got that animal inside that can come out and kick some ass.
There's actually a wonderful breathwork meditation that I teach to do exactly that. Yeah, for women.
So
probably works for men as well. No, I'm just saying it probably works for men as well.
For sure. I mean, I think everyone could use more primal intelligence because we get more and more separated from our inner animal. But I think men have more of a chance to get into it because men are more likely to get into brawls and get physical with each other, which will bring up the animal. So that's primal intelligence. I think women could use more. And also women have been demonized for their more primal self.
They've been called witches for having any sense of esoteric understanding of what it means to be a human. And when I say esoteric, I mean ancient, ancient rites and just earth-based wisdom. So
that's primal intelligence. And then somatic intelligence, I think both men and women could use more of that. Just by being more in their body, to do more things with the body, then you know where your body ends and where somebody's body begins. And when body meet body, either in a gentle way or in a sexual way or in an intense physical way, it's all practice, right? Okay, so that's primal and somatic intelligence. But I think men, of course, could use more socialization around emotional intelligence, because when you're really deeply connected emotionally to someone, you can feel when things are shifting, when they go from I'm having a great time to I'm getting a little scared right now. If you're emotionally intelligent, you know that shift. When I play with my son and he's 8 years old and he says don't pull any punches, so I've had to give him a few spare moves, a few bonus moves when we're wrestling, so I don't win all the time. I know when things are shifting. I know the slight shift of his mood that goes from intense primal to angry or to rageful. And to know that takes practice. And to know that in a woman that you're engaging in sex with, so you can tell that she's going from having a time to some kind of fight, fawn, freeze, trauma response, which could happen to anyone at any time, not just because of prior experiences. That takes practice and that takes emotional intelligence.
Philippe, I have a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're mentioning emotional intelligence right now, and I am wondering how emotional intelligence ties into attachment behavior, like an avoidance, for instance. How emotionally intelligent might they be compared to someone who is secure, or what different sets of emotional intelligence they have? How can they become more secure? Should they want to? Curious about how those things intersect in your experience.
Fantastic question. Great segue too, because we need to move in that direction. Otherwise, we'll just be here all night, which is no problem for me. But,
which I would love.
But we can always do this again. Okay, so months ago, maybe a year ago, somebody got in touch with me because they're doing a study that compares attachment styles to emotional intelligence, EQ. But then you have to define what is EQ. From what I know, there isn't an official measure for EQ. It's mostly it's mostly just intelligence. Either you're intelligent, or how well can you process a lot of data into something that is some interpretation of reality that makes sense. In this case, it's about emotions. So anyway, they were doing a study about that to try to figure out, is there correlation between secure, anxious, avoidant, or disorganized, which are the four big types of attachment styles, and emotional intelligence. And of course, you would believe that a secure person would be more emotionally intelligent because they're able to engage with emotions without freaking out, without coming from a place of fear or a place of anxiety or a place of resistance or dismissal. My interpretation is that in order of emotional intelligence, I think secure would be at the top. I think anxious would be next because they're so preoccupied. That's why they call it anxious preoccupied. They're so preoccupied about what's going on internally or in others because they're hyper aware, because they're worried about being abandoned. So they have to watch. They're always watching, is this person going to abandon me? Are they going to stay with me? Do they still love me? Do they still not love me? If you're somebody who's anxious, you get into these loops of what's happening. That's hyper awareness. All right. Secure people, on the other hand, they're kind of like, I trust the universe. So at some level, they're like, they trust that things will work out at a very deep primal way, because whenever they were growing, when they were growing up, their parents would show up at the right moment, give them enough attention, give them enough skin to skin or face to face, eye contact. All of that got them to believe that when they have a need, the universe will provide, but they still have to work for it. So there's this basic deep trust in the universe that arises. So anxious, hyper aware, secure, trusting. After that, I would put disorganized in terms of emotional intelligence, because disorganized, you could say that disorganized is basically somebody who's accumulated all the coping mechanisms, including avoidance, because they were growing up trying to love someone who was hurting them. And so their life was in danger. So a lot of the coping mechanisms of disorganized, most of them, come from a fear for your own life. An anxious person is afraid of being abandoned, but it's not to the degree of trauma and possible I'm going to die that a lot of people grow up with trauma and with abuse have to survive through, have to live through. So they're hyper aware for their life, and so they for some of them it's the other way around. They actually manage to dissociate because that was the best way to survive. So it could be one or the other. An avoidant person, on the other hand, grew up with the interpretation that having feelings and having needs didn't really matter. These needs were not going to get met, so you might as well just push them aside, push them under the rug, which doesn't mean the needs don't occur, but they're sublimated. You just push them down, you shut them down. And so a lot of avoidant people grow up basically feeling they have no needs, even though they still have them. And so they still move by those needs, but they don't really have a sense of how. And so there's much less practice for avoidant attachers in engaging in a conversation of emotions and feelings, which underlying that is in a conversation around needs. And so the result is less practice, and less practice means in less intelligence, or actually like some people would call literacy, less literacy about emotions and feelings and needs. And so that's my interpretation around emotional intelligence versus attachment theory. But I don't know if it's been proven in any way, shape, or form. That's just how I see it.
It's based on your experience and your intuitive observation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course. I mean, if you're here, it's because you like the way I geek out. And again, if it's not your experience, just throw it out the window. I mean, the attachment theory model is a deep one. It's very complex, and it's like people move within that landscape of attachment, and they also and it's not a diagnosis. It's not like you're like that and you're always going to be like that. There's flexibility. There's ways to grow your secure attachment style. There's ways to practice having conversations around emotions. Like I feel this way. you feel this way, you feel this way, that makes me feel this way, and that makes you feel this way. And you go, whenever it is a conversation, there's emotions going back and forth, much like there's touch when you're engaging with people. So it's important to understand that somebody who's avoidant can't just flip a switch and be good at it all of a sudden. Much like an anxious person can't just flip a switch and not be hyper aware anymore. This is all sort of, it's a deep emotional template that's installed in the human operating system really early on in the first 12 months of people's lives. So even though people can be harmful in the way that they either dismiss or engage too much with emotion, it's important to understand that people are wherever they're at. And if you want to start to engage with someone who leans towards avoidant or is avoidant or anxious or disorganized, you just have to take them as they are and start to trust them to be that. So including all the messiness and the shadows that come along with that, which brings us back to dark love. You have to be able to love people for everything they are and everything they're not, if you can muster it and you have what it takes. And if you do, then you can roll with it in a way that will be safer for you.
Very well said. Yeah, you have to have what it takes. And that takes a lot of practice for most people because a lot of it,
whole lifetime.
Oh, yeah, I mean, a lot of it is exactly the work that we do in Tantra. It's the expansive work. It's the ability to hold a larger container for the unknown, right? For the darkness, for the chaos. Like, okay, you can only really step into a facilitation role once you have done some work yourself, because you can then better empathize or be compassionate, maybe, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, you could say that the best teachers are the teachers that have done their work and gone a long way, because they've done every single step of their own trajectory, which is not all trajectories, it's just their trajectory, so you don't know everything, but at least you know what a long step by minute step trajectory can look like, versus somebody who say, if somebody's already secure, is already kind of the little Buddha, you can sort of engage with them. You're like, okay, well, how do you be? And they're kind of like, I don't know, just be. It's good. It's easy. But to learn from, so you have to understand that a lot of the people that we learn with are people that came from, that had a whole trajectory, and they're still in that trajectory. It probably will be forever.
Right.
And you can trust that. You can trust that, well, of course, as they get better, they'll be less harmful to themselves than others, which is totally normal. That's the path of sovereignty, making better choices for self and others, being responsible for self, being responsible for others, allowing others to be responsible for us. Those are what I call the three levels of responsibility. That takes practice, and it takes deep understanding of the human psyche.
Now we don't have too much longer. We have about maybe 10 to 15 more of chatting, and I want to open up just for a few brief questions. But I still want to talk about how polyamory ties in with attachment based on both your personal experience, the theory that you've studied, etc.
Yeah. All right. So I wrote a piece on that long time ago, because I was like, oh, how's this work, right? A secure person will naturally attach. That's just normal. Like you start getting in a relationship with someone, you're like, oh, no, I want to go get more intimate. They're not looking for the best person. They understand that people are there's a whole variety inside that person, and it's normal. They understand the normality of being human without necessarily knowing why. They just grew up with people are regular humans, and so secure people naturally attach. It is possible for humans to say, well, I want to attach to more than one, because that makes sense. You're my favorite person. You're my other favorite person. And how about we create like what they call a polycule?
I love that word, by the way, the polycule. It's my favorite word of the week for sure.
I think secure people are more likely to create polycules, which can look like families, regular families, husband, wife, partner, whatever you want whatever you want to call it, plus kids. That's a polycule. Like, it's been in existence since the dawn of humankind.
Can you go a little deeper into that? Just because I think some people who are watching don't already know what you mean by that, right? Okay. The unconditional love in the family context, creating the polycule.
Well, ask most parents and say, which kid do you like the most? And the parent's like, what do you mean? I like both of my kids just the same, and I like my partner just the same, but not, I mean, the same amount, but different. It's like you love everyone differently, but you love them in a way that's not like I love you more, I love you less. Maybe you like somebody more, or like somebody less, but the love that you share with the people in your close blood family can all coexist without competition. Of course, there's competition in time and attention because these are limited factors. But in terms of love, you could all say, you know, a parent of 7 kids could say, I love all my kids. And I'm not trying to decide which one I love more. Sometimes I spend more with one, spend more time with the other, and that changes over time. And I think the same is true for people who like to love more than one person at a romantic level. Totally normal, different kind of love, but also totally normal. And besides, you look at anyone and, you know, people have their job that they love, they have their best friend that they love, and they have their lover that they love, and they have their ex that they love. Like they're all kind of different kinds of love, and also different kinds of attention and time spent. And to me, that's a form of polyamory. It's like loving more than one. What people have a difficult time with, and I'll tell you why it makes sense, is that I think most humans naturally attach to one person. They attach to their closest caregiver, and when that caregiver goes away, they go on a search for another person to attach to. And I think humans are more likely to attach to one because it's most adaptive. You know, in the old days, the men were out hunting or out you know, protecting the land, and the kids were attached with their mom. And so I think in the realm of attachment, that's how we bring it back to attachment, is that we're more likely to attach to one person. So attaching to 2 or more at a sexual level, at a sexual primal emotional level, like this is my person and this is my person at the same level of engagement, I think it's difficult. I think most people will attach to one. And I'll tell you why this makes a difference. Makes a difference because in attachment theory, an anxious person is desperately looking for somebody to balance, to support them in creating emotional balance. They're more likely to fall off balance than all the other ones, or they're more likely to need someone to co-regulate with. So they're looking for that one person that will do everything. And if you're an anxious person, and you're watching this, it's very likely that you've experienced your partner being the end all be all of all your needs. You're going to be, this partner will meet all your needs. On the other hand, you look at an avoidant person, and an avoidant person is like, I don't need anyone. So if you show up in my periphery, in my world, and I'm having a good time with you, great, but eventually I know you're going to leave. That's the underlying primal belief. So avoidants they're great at open relationship, not open relationship, but they're great at having multiple sexual partners, not necessarily deep emotional bonding. Secure people are great at deep emotional bonding, but they also recognize the limitations. How many people can you deeply emotionally bond at any one time and give them the honor of your attention ongoingly in a way that you can maintain it and it feels good and deep and intimate? Not that many. So I think secure people create polycules. I think avoidance create large circles of sexual partners. I think anxious people make lousy or it's going to be very challenging for them to be in a polyamorous relationship, and people who are disorganized will have a really hard time because they're going to start to attach to someone, and at some point they're going to be too scared that this person is going to abandon them or turn on them, and they eject. So I think somebody who's disorganized is more likely to have more of a relationship anarchy kind of approach, or a solo poly kind of approach where nobody's more important than anybody else, and they can just pick and choose whenever they want. And same thing for avoidance too. So that's my take on polyamory versus attachment styles. I think polycules for secures, not so good for anxious, great for avoidance as long as everybody else is avoidant, because otherwise people are going to get hurt. And then disorganized are more likely to have multiple partners on and off as they try to find balance whenever their nervous system can handle it.
Yeah, I think when I was in my 20s, playing around with polyamory, I mentioned this to you in a one-on-one conversation we had earlier in the week, that it was a very like immature form of it, and there wasn't enough structure within my own understanding and my own experience, but also within the community in San Francisco that I was a part of. And now looking back and reflecting on my anxious tendencies, I probably was even worse at it back then because I was anxious.
Yeah, then that makes sense.
Yeah,
it's totally normal. And yeah, you could have used more structure that would have diminished the capacity for your partners to just switch off to somebody else whenever they felt like it. That would.
Do you have any? If someone is kind of pondering the concept of polyamory or coming to realization that it might be for them, or that they at least want to experience it, do you have any good maybe a reading suggestions that for people that they can?
Well, there's one book that I think is sort of like the Bible of polyamory. It's called More Than Two. Highly recommended. It just covers the whole gamut of what polyamory is about. And by polyamory, I don't necessarily want to call it that way. I could call it non-monogamy or open relationship. Yeah. They all have a slightly different definition. I mean, I think open relationship is more like you start with a primary partner and you kind of have other partners on the side, like secondaries, but sometimes that can shift, of course. Polyamory tends to be a little bit more egalitarian, or even to some degree more politically correct, and more egalitarian, politically correct. And I think there's other models like relationship anarchy, which is we do what we want whenever we want to. It's all medicine, and we just figure it out in the field as it happens. So that's the toughest, because feelings going to pop up, and the other person might say, I'm going to engage with those feelings, or your problem, or it's your responsibility. So it's very self-responsible, but this only works if people are self-responsible.
If everybody is doing it, like if everyone is doing it, right?
That's right. Go ahead.
I like you, Ashley, I had multiple partners when I was younger, and what the difference for me now is, thanks to ISTA, is all the boundary work and all the conscious living.
Structures.
Having a structure to it, not just, hey, tonight I see Susie and next week it's Jane, and it's more conscious, more mature, and the deal maker.
Yep. Yeah, and there's this concept, and you see that in ISTA, you see that in the book More Than Two on polyamory, is that you move from rules that are all about fear, generally speaking, they're all about benefiting you and fear-based, to agreements which are all about benefiting everyone, and they're about creating the best experience for everyone. So that you take the fear as much as possible. If you have the maturity and the awareness and the security to do that, fantastic. And the structure will help with that. The structure will help things from going too wrong or too out of the context of your ability to engage. And that's why it's important, because not everybody's everything. Not everybody has the ability to handle everything. So the agreements are not necessarily about avoiding fear. Fear will pop up, but the agreements support everyone in being their best self in the engagement. Because including their messiness, it's about creating a structure or light structure based on the light, dark, shadow model that I mentioned earlier. That structure supports everyone in being more fully present, trusting, safe, also more mature, because they're not getting poked all the time with weird and intense feelings that they can't handle. And it also supports a greater maturity, because the agreement also holds a particular that framework supports people in showing up more and growing more without feeling like they're going to be made wrong for the growth process. And so, the structure is there to help everyone in the process, not just one person.
And just to be clear, the ultimate aim of all of this practice is expansion.
Growth, development. The shadow work is all about growth. Expansive. You could look at it in any of those ways, and I think it all makes sense. I mean, everybody gets to choose for themselves what kind of growth they want to engage in, and my approach, at least when I coach my clients, is the more you know. So consent is about ready, willing, able, and informed, right? So I support people in the last two. If they show up ready and willing, I'll say, all right, let me add my resources, my understanding, my perspective of what's happening out there, so you can be better informed. And then when you start, and I'm going to support you in developing the skills that you need to engage in a way where you can calibrate and you can engage without hurting yourself in the process, which will then allow you to continue practicing until you get really good at the thing you want to grow.
Speaking about polyamory really quickly, one thing that I've discovered recently, like in my old model was, hey, I don't talk about anybody else and I do this. Whereas in the polyamory realm, as you speak of a family, everybody knows everybody knows what everybody's doing for the most part. Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it depends. I mean, I have nothing against don't ask, don't tell. However, I do believe that the more secure somebody is, the more communication is important to them. The more communicating around what's going on. It's like, it's hard to say, like, if your partner goes out to have a date and they come back and they're not supposed to talk about it, but they're having feelings coming up, and now their feelings are kind of impacting your relationship. It'd be nice. It'd be kind of good to know what's happening on with that partner, so there's a better sense of how to engage with that, rather than just say, well, you're having feelings and I don't like it, so stuff it because I don't want to deal with it. So that's not the kind of engagement that supports a greater consent and a greater sovereignty for everyone. If sovereignty is about making better choices for self and others in connection and in trust. So more communication by all means.
Thank you so much, Philippe. No, you can keep speaking. I just wanted to say thank you, and also make sure that if anybody had any last questions that we got those in too.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Tim? I bet it looks like Tim has a question.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's not so much, well, it's just kind of like a little bit of an anecdote, but I mean, it's definitely, there's might be a question in there, is that for me, just this is kind of like getting back to the whole, like, kind of pushing the yes, is that, for me, it's very timely too, because that's kind of like my edge, that I just personally, like I'm actually just more comfortable like not doing that. And I actually dated somebody like about 5 or 6 months ago, where she just wanted to just really push the envelope, and I couldn't, that wasn't where I was. And I'm like, whoa, this is like a whole other world to me. So, but yeah, so that, but I mean, she was actually more of like 11 out of 10. So it was like kind of another scale, but I jumped in with both, yeah, for sure. But it definitely kind of just pushed me more into other things of like just learning, like different BDSM things of, like rope play or, what not. So, but things that are kind of like broadening me and opening me up. So that's kind of my edge right now. And but yeah, so that's kind of, and I guess not really we probably don't have enough time to address it, but I noticed with her, it's like it's kind of a double-edged sword, because I think she was so desensitized over time due to traumas and sexual traumas in her life, that she needed this to kind of like just push this other level. So anyway, that's kind of like my personal antidote.
Yeah, I think the desensitization it's an issue. It's an issue because if people have either been desensitized or have dissociated so far or so much that the only way to feel is when they're being beaten into a pulp, that's, it's tricky to engage with, because you have to reach a pain level that basically you can feel. And I see this happen with people who are shut down. And I think that's just true for people who are avoidant. They're more likely to do sort of crazy things, do lots of drugs, drink a lot, because it'll sort of override their shutdown mechanism. And also that's partially one reason, at least one reason why avoidants will often get together with anxious attachers. because the anxious attacher is so intensely in their emotions that it will sort of awaken the avoidant to like, wow, there's emotions out there and this person loves me and I can feel it. Whereas normal, most of the time, they can't feel it. They're not so attached to so connected to their emotions that it's kind of, well, you can look at it as bland, but you could look at it as chill or as no big deal. But it's coming from a place of either shutdown or just having never practiced engaging with these emotions. So when you meet somebody who's so passionate and intense and intensely in their emotions as an anxious, it's like, wow, life has colors. It's popping, it's vivid, it's amazing, it's intense. It's woohoo. And there's massive reasons why this can never last. But at the very least, there's that sense. And I think the same is true for people who are disorganized, but I've done it. I've come from a place of deep trauma where they've shut down so much that their only way to access feelings and emotions is to get back close to that or beyond that trauma level.
Philippe, I have a question.
That's just a guess. Go ahead.
One last question. We have a few minutes left, and I don't mind going a little over time,
thanks,
but yeah, thank you so much, Tim.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, for the inspiring, because now I'm like, woo, I have a question now. What about Philippe? And this is not on our theme per se, but it's all related. Oh, woo, here we go.
We're off the map. We're in the unknown.
Uncharted territories. No, I'm sure you've done this before. I'm asking you because I trust that you've had to go and learn through all of this. What about breaking up consciously? What about parting? Well,
all right. Here's the thing about breaking up. If you really are if you're with someone that you've attached to, and I do mean attached at a primal level, which to a great degree means you're chemically attached to this person. You're addicted to them. You're addicted to their part, to the oxytocin that you get out of being close to them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's going to be hard. It's going to be hard because essentially you have to detox from that person.
Yeah.
And detoxing is not only hard because you're detoxing, which is essentially feels like, it often feels like physically painful. If you ever detox from drugs, well, imagine your own oxytocin is the most intense. It's the best drug there is because you generated it.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be the hardest to get off of. And not only that, but you have to deal with the grieving process on top of that. So not only is your body grieving, but emotionally, you have to let go of all these habits and all these dreams and all these ideas. And even if it's the best possible situation, most people, when they reach the breakout point, they will go into one of the coping mechanisms of grieving, whether it's bargaining or anger, and I can't remember all. There's 5 or 7 of them that I can't recall. But there's denial. So there's one person will get into one, the other person will get into a different one, and it's not gonna look good. Partially also because when you're at the point of breaking up, usually it's because things are not working, which means that both people are already reached a point of lack of resources in how they can be together. It's very different than if one person's like, I need to move for work, and the other person's like, I can't move. Okay, that's the cleanest kind of cut you can imagine, because it's not about the other person, and you still have to go through the grieving period and the primal grieving, which is the detaching process. Which also means that this person will always be your drug. So if you see them again in a year and you decide to sleep with them, it's kind of like doing heroin after you've stopped doing it for a year. It's not the same. I don't know the exact toxicology of it, but it's dangerous.
Exactly. It's the same.
Is that the good kind of danger, like the chaos, murky?
Never.
No, that's the stuff that gets you trapped, right? This is the kind of stuff that gets you out of your sovereignty.
Yeah.
This is especially true when the sex is through the roof. And it becomes the sex becomes addicting. It's another addiction.
That's right.
It's very hard to break.
Well, yeah, because there's multiple chemicals that get into play. It's not just like the oxytocin, it's the dopamine and cortisol. It's just all it's the chemical cocktail. Again, I'm not a biologist, so I don't know, or toxicologist, so somebody else will be able to. But I have been reading about attachment versus not versus attachment theory, but versus breaking up, and that's what we're talking about. The last piece I want to say about this is, if you're going to break up with someone, break up as amicably as you can. Obviously, understanding is going to most likely be messy and hurtful, or if not harmful, period. And my best recommendation around this is no contact for 6 months or more, with like no contact. And because every contact will reawaken this sense of this, it will slow down a grieving process, which will then extend the grieving process. So, and I've had to do that with a lover a few years ago, and it was, you know, I still think of her. She still kind of occurs to me as like the best sex of my life, right? And there's a reason. It's very similar to the drug addict thinking, oh, I could just have one more. Like, if she showed up in my bed, I'd probably go for it. And the same is true for my last lover as well. And I'm happy that we're not talking about, because we're not good for each other, but we're talking about primal impulse. And that goes below the consciousness level, and everything that's below the consciousness level, you can only engage with indirectly. It's like batting the surface of the pond, hoping to move the silt at the bottom. It's hard.
Thank you so much. I already have ideas for our next talk.
Yes. Happy to.
Thank you, Philippe. Are there any last little bits that have come up? Anything small that we can squeeze in? No? Okay. I also want to say a big thanks to those of you who participated with us. That, you know, it drew out a lot of Philippe's wisdom, and, you know, things that only one brain can't always, you know, process or come up with. And I hope, I'm sure it was beneficial for everyone. Thank you so much, Philippe. It was awesome. I'm just going to unmute everybody. You guys can all say, you know,
thank you.
Thank you
It's a
too.
real
Thank
pleasure.
Very much. Yeah.
Thank you,
so much.
Ashley. Thank you too, Philippe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank
Ashley.
you so much.
I posted I commented with your attachment theory blog article in the comments. We also have some highly important watchers on our Facebook page. People are commenting some interesting things about attachment theory, and Leanne, you know, there's some advice for you there on like.
Yeah, send me the link. Send me the link to that. No, it's awesome, because I mean, honestly, it was just reflecting me back, and it was really, really appreciative to be able to be like, yeah, you knew what the heck you were seeing and what happened, and I predicted it. So yeah, I'm good. I'm in a good place. Thank you.
Beautiful.
I'm just going to end this on Facebook. So thank you, Facebook people. We love you. Add Philippe.
Yeah, send me the
If he
Facebook
resonates
link.
with you, he's amazing.